What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the quarterback of the football team, Daniel Jones. Now that we've seen the whole offseason play out, now the New York Giants may still go out there and maybe add an offensive lineman in free agency. I'll probably talk about some of the potential prospects in a future video because I still think they could do that. After all, the New York Giants did save over $1 million by trading down twice in the first and second round of this year's draft. Maybe some of that money goes towards adding another depth lineman or a guy that could potentially start at the center or guard position. But for the most part, we know the supporting cast for Daniel Jones. And in this video, I'm also going to touch on some of the rumors that have started to circulate, especially after what Dave Gettleman had to say regarding Aaron Rodgers and the possibility of coming on with the New York Giants. There were some rumors on Twitter yesterday where Rodgers supposedly listed the 3 or 4 teams that he'd want to end up with, and the New York Giants were one of them. And if that is true, the first thing I'll say is, you know, I'm humbled as a Giants fan that a player that good would want to come here. It means that we're starting to do something right. But in this video, I'll talk about why I don't think it's really a possibility at all. Now, of course, you always listen, which is what Gettleman went on to say. But first, I wanted to talk about Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones is coming into this year with a lot of question marks, rightfully so, right? He regressed last year, at least statistically, only throwing 11 touchdowns. Now, we could talk about all the factors, the offensive line, the new scheme, the lack of weaponry, everything else, not to mention he got hurt when we started to, it looked as if he was starting to progress throughout the year. He definitely improved in terms of his fumbling problems, but you could also point to the fact that they ran a more conservative offense, which lended itself to less turnovers, which Jones got better at, but he also got worse at putting the ball in the end zone. Saquon Barkley going down, of course, did not help either. But the reason why I think Daniel Jones is in for a breakout season, and when I say breakout season, I don't want anybody to get my words, misconstrued. Breakout doesn't necessarily mean a top 5 quarterback like Josh Allen. Breakout to me means he makes a dramatic improvement from year 2 to year 3, like Baker Mayfield and like Josh Allen. And I hope he could reach the level of a top 10 to 15 quarterback by year's end, because if he does that with the team that we have, I think we're going to win a lot of football games this year. And I think the talent is there. To me, he's got to work on some things. He's got to get better at his reads. He's got to get better at the pocket awareness. But with the weapons on this team and the more familiarity in this offense, I think for the first time since Daniel Jones has been a member of the New York Giants, he has finally been set up for success. If I'm being completely honest, you all know I wasn't a big fan of Daniel Jones when we drafted him on draft night. I gave him a chance, and I do think he has the tools. The question is, does he have the mental makeup, and does he have the tools around him to get the most out of him at that quarterback position? When he first came in, I always thought that the New York Giants rushed him in. I thought it was a mistake to bring him in just after 2 games. I thought they should have let Eli play 8, 9, 10 games, let Daniel Jones learn the playbook, gradually bring him in. I thought that was the Giants' first mistake when handling Daniel Jones. Of course, he had a really good game against the Bucs, but then defenses caught on, and you really saw him start to struggle down the stretch before he caught on later in the season when they had the huge game against Washington. But the stats were always a little bit misleading, right? He beat up on bad teams. He threw like 15 of his touchdowns against like 3 or 4 opponents, some of the worst defenses in the NFL. But he definitely showed promise that year. I thought they should have eased him along more. And with that came more pressure from the fan base because people saw 24 touchdowns. They expected a massive jump year 2, but what they didn't take into account was that he had to learn a completely new playbook, that he was without Saquon Barkley, that there was a pandemic with a new system on both sides of the ball, a new head coach, and everything else. And you knew that they were going to come out shaky, not to mention they played defenses like the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Rams, so on and so forth. So I knew he was going to get off to a shaky start. But this year, now that he's in the same system, and I do think they'll add wrinkles to it with bringing in guys like Callaway and everything else, but in the same system, with the familiarity, with more continuity on the offensive line, and the offensive line still has major question marks for me, but just the fact that you have Barkley back, that you have the weapons that we've added, I think the offensive line will perform better than maybe some people are anticipating, or at least I hope that. I'm not telling you they're going to even be above average, but if they're close to average, I think Daniel Jones will have a breakout season for the New York Giants this year, and I think we're going to win more football games than some of the pundits may think. Jones has the tools around him now. There's no excuses. Saquon Barkley to me, number 2 overall pick, when healthy, probably the most dynamic running back in the sport, if not one of the top 2 or 3. Kenny Golladay, one of the top 15 wide receivers in football. You add a first-round wide receiver in Kadarius Toney that adds another element to this offense. You add Kyle Rudolph that is going to help dramatically in terms of blocking and in red zone offense, which is where we ranked 31st last year. Well, you bring in 2 targets with him and Golladay. You bring in speed with Kadarius Toney. You also have Saquon Barkley back. You now have Evan Ingram in a lesser role where he should be able to even exploit defenses better. The same could probably be said for Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton. So to me, there's no excuses for Daniel Jones this year. And in the end, I think Daniel Jones is going to show up and he's going to put a lot of haters to bed. I think by year's end, Giants fans will have some confidence that this guy could very well be the quarterback going forward. Now, for people that question whether or not he could be the quarterback going forward, I completely understand it. The guy had a mediocre year at best last year in which we won 6 games. The reason we were winning games had very little to do with the quarterback position and had almost everything to do with the defense and the running game. But now the question that we're going to have answered this year was the lack of the passing game because of Daniel Jones, or was it because of the lack of help around him? Because now he has the help, and that's what I'm looking forward to this year. And I think Dave Gettleman did a really good job providing Daniel Jones with the help necessary for us to be able to evaluate him as a quarterback. I just hope that the offensive line can hold up. Now, in terms of the Aaron Rodgers rumors, in case you guys haven't heard, Dave Gettleman was asked about it a day ago, and he came out and said it wasn't any of his business. He was then asked about it again today on WFAN, and you could kind of interpret this as GM talk and saying the right thing, so people can't say that, well, you never looked into it. But this is what Dave Gettleman had to say regarding Aaron Rodgers and the possibility of coming to the New York Giants. And this is off of rumors, by the way, yesterday that said that Rodgers had the Giants as one of his 3 or 4 most interested teams that he'd want to go to. Dave Gettleman on the possibility of the Giants trading for Aaron Rodgers. You explore everything. Added that the team remains committed to Daniel Jones. So he's not closing any doors. That coming from Giants Daily on Twitter. He's not closing any doors. He's not telling you that, they're going to, not even look into it at all if the opportunity presents itself and the right deal was there. But in the same breath, he said, we are fully committed to Daniel Jones. The first thing I'm going to say is I do think they are fully committed to Daniel Jones. Dave Gettleman drafted this guy 6th overall. That's his baby. That's his reputation. Joe Judge took this job full well knowing that Daniel Jones was going to be his guy. And when Joe Judge speaks, I don't think a lot of bullshit comes out of his mouth. If I'm, to be quite frank, Joe Judge has expressed extreme confidence in Daniel Jones. And I think they think they're building a great team around him. And I think they both believe that Daniel Jones is going to be a very good quarterback in the NFL. By the same token, to what Dave said, when you have the MVP available at the most important position in all of sports, you at least listen. That would, that would be silly not to. So if this is true, I guess it's good to listen. But if you want to be realistic and not live in the clouds, here's what it would take to land Aaron Rodgers. First off, it would take a plethora of draft picks, right? And the last 2 or 3 years, Dave Gettleman has put in a lot of work to get this rebuild to the point where it is now, where I think we're starting to see greener pastures, and we're setting ourselves up for long-term success. If you were to trade for Aaron Rodgers, you throw the long-term success out the window. You're in win-now mode, and when Aaron Rodgers retires, which is inevitably probably going to be in 3 or 4 years, you then reset everything all over again, and you're going to have to start from scratch. It would not be the best answer for long-term success. The question is Daniel Jones? We have to wait and see, but you still wouldn't be giving up future draft capital if Jones is not the answer. You could then draft another quarterback with that pick and continue to build this team up appropriately. To get Aaron Rodgers, it's probably going to cost you 3 first-round picks. The 2 first-round picks next year and your 2023, if I had to guess, at a bare minimum. But the problem doesn't stop there. You also have to account for his salary. Aaron Rodgers is due to make $37 million this year, which fully goes against the cap. And yes, if you brought him in, could you manipulate some of that money? Sure, but you look at all the money we've already backloaded towards next year's salary cap. To me, it doesn't add up unless you include players in the trade. And then you have to say to yourself, well, what players could we include in the trade? It would have to be players that make a lot of money. The only players on this team right now that make a lot of money or guys that would significantly hurt the defense if we lost them. Players like Martinez, players like Bradbury, players like Leonard Williams, they would absolutely have to be included in the trade, and you'd have to give up 3 first-round picks. And if you're willing to do that, well, you're all in. And you got a 2, maybe a 3-year window to capture a Super Bowl with a worse team than you have now, excluding the quarterback position, because, of course, you'd be trading some players from this team. And suddenly that defense that we all feel could be a top 5 unit going into the year maybe we don't feel so strongly about. Now, don't get me wrong. Aaron Rodgers is actually my favorite player in the NFL that does not wear a New York Giants uniform. I've always loved Aaron Rodgers. I think he's one of the most talented quarterbacks in the sport, plays the most important position, and if he were to come here, would instantly make the offensive line better. He's one of the best pre-snap quarterbacks the league has to offer in terms of his ability to read defenses. So don't get me wrong. Daniel Jones will never be Aaron Rodgers. That's just facts. Aaron Rodgers is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. But that doesn't mean that you sell the farm to bring in a 37, 38-year-old Aaron Rodgers when you believe in a 23, 24-year-old Daniel Jones. To me, it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up with the timeline that the New York Giants have built for this football team. And I genuinely believe that Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge have built this team up to give Daniel Jones every opportunity possible. Will they listen? Sure. Will it happen? No. Expect the Denver Broncos or maybe even the Raiders if he is to be traded. He will not be a New York Giant, at least not in my opinion. Now, shocking things have happened before, but I don't see it. The New York Giants are not that type of team that's set to give up on a kid after 2 years in which they've given him no opportunity to succeed. They've set him up for failure the entire way. They rushed him in. They didn't have the team situated to give him help. Now they have finally done that. And now Dave Gettleman finally gets the opportunity to show everybody, this is why I drafted this guy 6th overall. I don't think Dave's in a rush to bring in a new quarterback, being that his reputation relies on Daniel Jones. And I don't think Joe Judge would have taken the job knowing that Daniel Jones was going to be his quarterback long term if he didn't like him. I mean, that's just facts. He's a smart guy. Joe Judge thinks things through. So I think Jones is going to be your quarterback, and I think Jones is going to break out in 2021. But I guess the speculation's fun to talk about. Aaron Rodgers is not going to be a Giant. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.